Disclaimer, the athletes involved in the making of this production are not in any way involved in sports wagering. This is purely for educational purposes on the implications of the sports betting industry on athletes. Welcome to episode 2 of Pressure and Profit, How Betting Affects Athletes. I am your host, Katie Boff, and we are officially onto our second episode, so let us kick it off. On this podcast, I interview UGA athletes about the pressures of the growing betting world, but I want to start off by making this absolutely massive, huge disclaimer that no athlete that I interview, or me for that matter, is involved in any form of sports wagering. This is purely for educational purposes on how the growing industry of sports betting is affecting high-performing athletes on the just massive stage that they are playing on. And today, we are talking to just an all-around wonderful athlete. This kid is the son of a Georgia tennis legend and simply loves everything about the University of Georgia. So, ladies and gentlemen, may I please welcome Mr. Parker Jacques.
Hey, y'all. Thanks, Katie, for having me on. I'm excited to get to do this and talk a little bit about some sports betting.
Oh, yeah. Let's do this thing. Okay, Parker, you are a sophomore tennis player from Huntsville, Alabama. Yeah. You made your first spring singles appearance with a 6-3, 6-0 win over NC A&T State, and you also made your spring doubles debut with Miguel, defeating the Citadel's Nick Strompus and Tucker Hendricks 6-1. Last season, you were the recipient of the Coach Dan McGill Tennis Scholarship, and love this, you use your position on the team to spread the gospel to other student athletes, even not just people on the tennis team, but people all around. And like I mentioned previously, you're the son of Eddie Jacques, who made his mark on this tennis program with his 3 straight conference titles, along with several other accolades. So of course, this program, I could venture to say, is very close to your heart. So I guess, what does it mean to play at this university?
It's awesome. It's really, really cool coming here since a young age and watching Georgia football games and getting to be around the tennis facility. I remember one of my favorite memories of getting to be here. My dad had an alumni event, and so getting to watch them play at the courts and get to run around with a bunch of other kids and play hide and seek at the old indoor facility was really, really cool. And so now to get to be here and actually get to play on the team and get to be a part of Manny's last season last year, and then getting to kick off Jamie's career here at UGA has been really, really awesome. So I'm blessed and thankful to be here.
Awesome. I want to talk briefly about this is side tangent, but just curious. I want to talk about your motivation to share the gospel with your teammates. Can you share some of your thoughts on what this is all about?
Yeah. So I think coming into college, knowing I was going to be around a group of 10 to now this year we've got 14 guys on the team, all from different walks of life. I knew that as a follower of Jesus, what an opportunity I had to get to come and live my life in a way that was clearly different than probably what maybe guys are used to seeing or how they were living their lives, and not come at it from a place of judgment or better than, but just like, hey, like this is the way that I think that our lives are supposed to be lived. I think that following Jesus is the best thing for us. It's life to the full. It's not something that's rigid and boxed in, but it's actually abundant life. And so it's been so cool from freshman year, getting to have conversations with guys and just kind of naturally coming up, them being curious about different things. So it's been really awesome over the past 2 years of just different conversations, sitting down and seeing guys that have I guess furthered in their faith journey or at least have put their toes in the water has been awesome. So yeah, that's really who I am. No matter whether I'm on the tennis court or in a classroom, like I want to carry that well, and be open. Like, hey, if someone's got a question, like, hey, I'm here to talk. I'm an open book in sharing my faith or stuff that I've struggled with. Just so yeah, that's who I am, and I'm grateful to be able to carry it on with my teammates.
Right, I love that. Do you have a favorite memory maybe that comes to mind since you've been on the team, or even before, if it relates to your dad or whatever?
Like specifically related to tennis?
Yeah.
I would say with my dad, we've gotten to play doubles a couple of times in tournaments, that's been, especially the ones that we played back home in Huntsville. Those are probably some of my favorite tennis memories of getting to do that in front of and family and coaches and friends back home in Huntsville. So getting to play doubles with my dad has been amazing. Here at Georgia, there's been different moments. I think getting to play doubles with Miguel was really special earlier this year. The guys, we had a doubleheader that day, so it was the second match, and so it's a long day for a lot of the guys, but did such an awesome job of making that feel so special for me and Miguel, and so I was just really grateful to be able to do that. And then following up, as you mentioned, that singles win, my dad was in town for that, and so not knowing what next year holds, but I was so grateful to get to play that last singles match and have my mom and dad watch, and that was pretty sweet.
Yeah, I love that. He was probably so proud of you, and he's like, "That's my boy." I love that. So kind of transitioning into sports betting a little bit, not to make the abrupt change. How aware are you of like the growing industry? Like, do you open your ears at all to any of the talk, or does anyone on the team?
I guess specifically related to tennis, not as much, but I guess I'm definitely aware of it. I feel like you can't miss it when you're watching sports. Like, it's sponsored by DraftKings, or it's a commercial about this or that that's like, hey, start and you get $10 free or whatever it might be. So I think it's tough to miss when you're watching sporting events of how relevant it is. And so I'm decently aware of it. I've always grown up doing prop bets for the Super Bowl and stuff like that. So like little things like that have been fun for me, but I definitely can see how much money is in it and how much it affects. I think betting allows for probably I guess a bigger prize pool for different sports or whatever it might be. So while it relates to tennis, not as much, but as a whole, I'm somewhat aware of kind of how big it's getting.
Yeah, we were just talking about how a few pro players, especially since your dad coaches and everything. What does he have to say about sports betting? Does he say anything about it?
I think that something that's pretty interesting that we've at least almost laughed over is as it relates to tennis. There's now UTR is a rating system for tennis players, and also they host different events. And so now that there's UTR events, which doesn't give you professional points in any way, there's actually a good bit of prize money behind it for doing well in the tournament. But you can even bet on those events, which is kind of crazy to me. And so actually a teammate right now, he's out in Houston playing one of those events. And so being able to bet on those events we've almost like, wow, like it's gone that far, which is kind of interesting and crazy that it's into those events as well.
Right. Okay. So to transition into what we're really here to talk about today, Parker, we're going to be talking about the pressures of match fixing in the tennis world. You are well connected in tennis and surely know some players who have taken the next step after college to go pro, like we had just previously talked about. But there is this running issue in pro tennis, especially at the lower tiers, and it is match fixing. So literally in just one Google search, I saw 7 separate incidents of match fixing scandals in the sport, literally just on the first page. Like what? But before we chat with Parker about all that he has to say about this, I'm going to give y'all some background and context on the issue. So with match fixing, what are we talking about here? We are talking about tennis players being paid to lose a match. So in match fixing, big time gamblers, they'll connect with athletes, reach out to them, pay them to lose, and then bet on them to lose, essentially, so they know what's happening. It happens in many tournaments, especially ones that don't have high, at the lower level, like not high viewership numbers, since they're not subject to so many eyes where they can seemingly get caught. But the question is, okay, so match fixing doesn't only happen in tennis, but tennis is a huge one. So why? Basically, early allegations are often centered on players from the lower tier professional circuits. And this is where the prize money for tournaments are lower, and this gives them more incentive to be bribed, I guess. So I looked at this article from the University of Sydney titled "Why We Shouldn't Be Surprised Tennis is Implicated in Match Fixing." And that was in 2016, and it talks about this. It says that tennis is a one-to-one sport, so you can work with one athlete to change the outcome of the entire match without worrying about getting more players roped into it to basically ensure the match is fixed. And then also players outside of the top ranked ones that would be making more money, they like the tournaments pay a lot less, and so they could be making more money from fixing the match than from winning, the tournament altogether, because it's like paying like $2,000 to win the entire thing. So, you know what I mean? And there are like 60,000 annual matches, and like that's a lot of opportunity for bribery, And then also in tennis, it's hard to prove if a match is fixed. For example, a player could just get injured during the second set or whatever, and it's hard to be like, yeah, you fixed the match because of that. And then also, I watched this YouTube video titled "Match Fixing: The Professional Tennis Scandal Nobody is Talking About" from Colt Tennis, and this video talks about how tennis players use the points made from how far they make it into a tournament from their best 18 tournaments for ranking purposes. So essentially, what would stop a player from entering more tournaments, throwing a few, but still doing well in like 18 of them? You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of room for, there's a lot of incentive there. There's a lot of room for match fixing. But we're going to talk about it's not only like the entire match being thrown. It can be this thing called spot fixing, which is just throwing a set or a game and not necessarily losing the entire match. But yeah, that one's a big one. So basically, from 2007 to 2008, the International Tennis Federation began investigating several incidents involving the lower-ranked players. And since then, here are some of the most notable tennis match-fixing scandals. So in 2011, Spanish tennis player David Sanchez was banned for suspicion that he was match-fixing. In 2009, so that happened in 2011. There was another instance in 2015 with a Tunisian player. More suspicions. There was in 2016 a joint investigation by BBC and BuzzFeed revealed 16 players from the ATP top 50 were under suspicion for match fixing. And then in 2016, again, Italian doubles player Daniele Breccali.
Sounds great to me.
He was banned for 3 years, and he had a maybe $250,000 fine. I gotta double check that, but yes, $250,000. Did I say that?
Yeah.
Okay, and then most recently, huge thing in 2023, NPR shared news about 180 players from 30 plus countries participating in a transnational match fixing ring, which started back in 2014. Basically, the way it worked is players didn't have to necessarily throw the entire match. This is where that spot fixing thing came in, where they would just throw a set or a game. And it got to the extreme lengths that it became worth $50 billion annually, this ring. And it was run by a law student from Brussels named Gregor Sargison. So crazy. So, as you can see, huge ongoing issue. Since all of these scandals in 2021, the International Tennis Integrity Agency was finally created to investigate and combat match fixing, which is a relatively new thing. But based off all of that information, what are your initial thoughts on just all of this?
I wasn't totally aware of that last thing you mentioned about it being a $50 billion annually, that fixing ring. So that kind of blew me away. The other things have definitely been, I guess, the lower rank stuff I've kind of heard about, and am decently aware of, just because like it is pretty easy to pull off. Like if people aren't watching and like really tracking what's going on in the lower ranks, and especially when it comes to betting, like I can go lose to anyone regardless of the level. That like if I go play a match, I could play against a beginner or really any range, and I could lose to them just because I have the ability to hit the ball out. And so like obviously it's very anyone can lose on command basically. And so yeah, it's definitely one of the easier sports to pull it off, to be successful, and I guess fixing a match, just because of the amount of control, like you mentioned, it being a one-on-one sport. So yeah, I didn't realize the I guess the scope of how big it's gotten. I'll get an ESPN notification, I feel like every now and then, of like, oh, this player, this umpire, or something along those lines of like, hey, betting or match fixing. But yeah, that is blew me away when you mentioned that.
Yeah. Are you ever skeptical? I guess since you're already aware a little bit of it, like, are you ever skeptical when you're watching tennis?
I've actually, I thought before we had this podcast, I thought about a conversation I had with a friend of mine, and she is very skeptical about like even like professional major major championships of like, hey, like this set being fixed or that set being fixed. And I'm the one that's like, I think maybe a little more of a, I guess not a purist in a way of like, hey, like I think the major championships and many of like the biggest tournaments in the world don't see that impacted. I don't know if I'm naive to it or, but I tend to be on the side of like, hey, like those massive tournaments, the major championships, Masters 1000s, which is kind of like that step below your Wimbledon, U.S. Open, French Open, Australian Open. I feel like those tournaments, because the reward and upside for those players is so high that it probably doesn't sneak in there, whether it be, like you mentioned, the spot fixing. I don't see that as much. But if you talk to another person, they may be on the team of like, hey, no, like Novak versus Rafa, their French Open match where it was fixed where Nadal was going to win the first set or Novak was going to win the second set. So yeah, I guess it depends on who you talk to, but I don't see that as much in the higher ranks.
Yeah. So obviously you don't know the hearts of everybody in the tennis world altogether, obviously. But do you think that players have, like, with the growing industry of sports gambling, that people are more money focused, or are they more like winning, playing well focused?
I think that's a tough question. I think that those that are kind of teetering in the top 200 and they believe that they've got the ability to go and be in the top 100, top 50, I think they're much more focused on playing well, and don't want to risk something of like, hey, like fixing a match. But like you mentioned again, like the lower ranks that maybe they don't necessarily believe that they're going to be able to make it to top 125 in the world, where that's like kind of the threshold where you start really can like make money. So if they don't believe they can ever reach there, but they can be 600 in the world for 8 years and match fix, then like I can see how that can be a tempting option for them. But again, like I said, with the kind of bigger tournaments, believing more, like whether I'm naive to it or like a purist, like I tend to believe like, hey, people really do want to make it to the top 100 in the world and play at Wimbledon and do those things. So yeah, I think probably the biggest thing is, do they believe they can get to that point where they're going to be able to make a career out of it? If so, I think that they're really going to try and push and pursue to that. If they're not so confident in that, I think that's where the betting match fixing option becomes a lot more, I guess, tempting.
So the example that you were kind of like the hypothetical of someone who is ranked 600
Yeah.
play for 8 years and match fix. How do you like? Do you think that they feel guilty?
um, I guess that probably comes down to the individual.
Right.
Um, there may be people that I know myself, I wouldn't even come close to being able to do that. But yeah, I guess there may be some people that can roll off their shoulders and it's not hurting anyone. And so like, quotes hurting anyone. So I think that maybe that they're able to do that and not feel bad about it. I think others that maybe really care about like the sport of tennis and like what it's meant to them, I think it's probably a little bit more difficult. Like, wow, like if you think back to not to make it about like the memories that I've had in tennis, like I wouldn't want to do anything to damage it in a way.
Right.
And so I think the people or the professionals that like, wow, they have such a deep respect for the sport of tennis and the history of it. I think that would probably be a deterrent from like being able just to match fix without feeling guilty about it.
Right. So in y'all's position here, does the NCAA or Georgia specifically take any precautionary measures to educate and advise y'all against betting?
Yeah, so we'll have always at the beginning of the year in August, we've got a bunch of team or meetings with different people within the athletic association where they'll come in and talk about different compliance things. And each year they always have someone talk about betting and basically like anything that has an NCAA sponsored national championship, you just can't bet on it. Not even the littlest of things. And so, yeah, they've even given examples of where college athletes have sports bet, and I think it was a quarterback. I'm not gonna remember the university that he played for, but his average bet was like $7. So it's so small, but like they caught him, and he's never gonna get to play college football again. And so, yeah, we've definitely have conversations about it at the beginning of the year of like, hey, like you just can't do it. Like there's no way of getting around it. Like they'll find you, especially at a university like this. There's just too many eyes looking for you to get around it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Do you think, yes, like y'all have those meetings, do you think it's enough education, or do you think that it should be a bigger conversation with how much it's grown?
I think that I don't know if I think the education works just because like especially for our team, like no one is willing to take the risk of losing their ability to play tennis in college. And so I think just that and seeing players that have gotten caught for small things like the $7 a bet for that quarterback, I think that just that itself, that like, hey, if they catch you, you're never going to play college tennis again. I think that is the biggest deterrent. Yes, the education is helpful, but that itself just scares, especially at least being around my teammates. That's what scares anyone that would even have that thought away from it.
Right. So going back to at the professional level, what do you think could be done, if anything, to prevent this issue from continuing?
It was fun. Go ahead.
Sorry. Like obviously with the prize money being so low, that's like one thing.
Yeah. So last night I was actually, I wrote some things down just because I was like, this actually might make a little sense. Kind of just hit me, and I was like laying in bed. I was like, well, I was thinking about, okay, I knew that this was kind of going to be a question that we were going to talk about. And so I was like, this might actually work. I don't know what's necessarily in place right now. But a couple of things that I thought about was only being allowed to bet on the top 200 ATP players or the top ATP events. So you have major championships, Masters 1000s, ATP 500, and ATP 250. Then there's also some challenger events that also have a good amount of points towards your ranking and prize money as well. And so whether it be, okay, if you're in the top 200, you can bet on those players, but anything underneath that, it's just you're not allowed. just because again, like, hey, you're betting on the top 200, like those people are they're close to like making a name for themselves or being able to really just provide for themselves through the avenue of tennis. They're close to being able to get to play, if not already getting to play in the majors. And so like that's what every I guess tennis player that turns professional, like they dream about getting to go to Wimbledon and getting to play there, getting to play in front of the U.S. Open fans as an American tennis player like that. Like that's what I think is really special. So I thought that was maybe like an option that might be helpful for sports betting. And then I also thought, well, maybe instead of just like limiting it to the top 200, if you had some sort of, I guess, okay, so there's around 1,500 players ranked. From 1,500 to 1,000, the max bet for those players is $1,000. Mm-hmm. And then from 1,000 to 750, it's $1,500. And these numbers aren't worked out exactly right to what they're actually making, but just kind of a hypothetical. And then kind of as you work your way up to the top 250, you can bet maybe $5,000, and then the top 100, you can bet $10,000 on those matches. And then when you make it in the top 10, you can like you're kind of free to do whatever you want with however you like to bet. And then the last thing that I kind of thought about, and that could also apply to the different tournaments. Like, hey, the max bet you can bet on there's ATP events, challengers, and futures. So futures is the kind of lowest level of where you can make ATP points and have a professional ranking. So maybe, hey, on those 15Ks, that's the smallest future tournament. Maybe that's where like, hey, you're only limited to $1,000 a match for for those 15Ks, and then kind of as you work your way up to the major championships, hey, that's where you're kind of free to do whatever you want and how much you wager on a specific match. And then the last thing was like capping how many bets can be made per match. It's like, hey, it's a 15K, for example, or it's a player that's 900 in the world. Like you're only allowed to bet. There's only 5 total bets that are allowed to be made on that specific match. And then again, the same kind of scheme as you get into the higher ranks and higher tournaments, like the major championships. There's no limit on the amount of bets that can be made, because I know that is obviously a huge source of revenue for whether it be sponsors or tournaments or whatever it might be. But I think something like that has the ability to work. Again, those numbers that I've thrown out, they aren't studied or looked at like, oh, that's actually like the spot that the amount of money that needs to be allowed for a certain match, or the amount of total bets that should be allowed. That's again more of an example to kind of show the I guess the logic behind that.
Mm-hmm. So you think it is an issue that you can bet on, like as of right now, that you can bet on any player, any event, anything to no limit.
Yeah.
Like you think that's
kind of crazy. Like there's because I think that if people that want to bet, like who is really betting, and again, I could be wrong with this and I don't want to make an assumption, but like who's really betting on and is really invested and cares about watching a match that's 900 in the world versus 850 in the world and placing $15,000 on that match like that? There's no way that's
people are trying to find the best value thing.
Yeah.
And then they like crunch numbers to figure out what they try to beat the system essentially.
Yeah.
Or they're fixing a match.
Yeah, exactly. So I think to be able to stop match fixing, I think that like, yeah, hey, like allow it for the major championships. Like you want to bet on Nadal Djokovic in the finals of the Australian Open, go for it. Like you care about the result of the match. Like it's fun to watch. It's like the biggest tournament, one of the 4 biggest tournaments you can play as a tennis player. Like I think that's totally fine. But yeah, I think that the lower you go, like I just don't see where there's a whole lot of good in it. Especially for the players, it's just not. You're just putting the players in a really tough position. If someone comes to you you're a 21-year-old kid and you're 800 in the world, and someone comes to you with an offer to make $50,000, like that's just putting the player in a really tough spot. And And so I think that, well, yes, you can say, like, of course he can just say no, but I think that's a tough situation. And then obviously, like, when bets don't go well, I think as you discussed a little bit in your last podcast of, like, how just the hate that players can receive from that, like, that's very real. And even teammates of mine have kind of shared, like, they played 15Ks, the smallest level ATP event that you can play. And for like first or second round matches and things like that, where they get a DM on Instagram of just things that are extremely hateful. And I'm like, that was mind blowing to me that, like, my teammates are playing these super small, tiny events in Tunisia, and they're getting these DMs on Instagram. So I think it's just for the health of the sport, for the health of the players, and also honestly just for, like, people betting. Like, y'all don't need to be betting on matches that are 1,000. Like, the guys ranked 1,000 in the world. Like, there's other ways to go about it if you're a professional bettor, I guess.
Yeah. So even if this makes a bunch of people angry, you think this would be
I think
a fix.
absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because again, like, I'm not in that world as, like, a professional bettor or, like, have really dove into it at all.
Right.
And so, like, maybe there's a ton of value in a match that's between 800 but I just don't see it. Even, like, as a tennis player, like, I don't see, if you don't know tennis, like, how you're going to be able to, like, decipher between 800 versus 780 in the world.
Right. I mean, betting is a losing game.
Yeah, and
it's
so, it may make people angry, but again, I think where people enjoy, like, or where you see, like, I guess the bigger bets, it should be on bigger events and not on these. I don't know if that's fair to say, but
right.
Yeah, I think that this could be helpful.
Are you worried about the direction that sports betting is going right now?
For
the sake of
the
players,
for specifically in tennis.
I mean, not necessarily.
I wouldn't say yet. Maybe as I look into it more, I may give a different answer. But I think the biggest thing is obviously, like, the hate that players receive. Like, I don't necessarily think that the amount of money put on specific events is necessarily bad for players. But I think that, like, where you just, like, get constant, like, stuff sent to the house or just crazy things like that, that is where, like, somehow, and that's so difficult to regulate, and I don't have an answer to that whatsoever. But I wouldn't say it's necessarily in a terrible place right now or heading in a terrible place. Mm-hmm. Again, I may give you a different answer if I took a week to really dive into it. But as of right now, that's kind of where I would stand.
Mm-hmm. So we talked about how if a player was presented, if they're making, like, no money, but then they're presented with this crazy opportunity to be bribed, essentially. In this situation, do you just feel at all for the players that end up getting wrapped into this? Or are you like, no, they know what they're doing. This is...
I'm probably definitely more in the camp of, like, no, they know what they're doing. Yeah, I can see how that's I've never been even close to the situation where, like, $50,000 is put in front of me, like, hey, if you lose this tennis match by a certain number of games or whatever it might be that needs to happen, you get $50,000. So I don't understand, like, that emotional, like, experience of, like, that offer being put in front of me. But if you, like, you know what you're like, I'm the, like, they know what they're doing. Like, mm-hmm. I don't know how they wouldn't. And so, yeah, I guess that, again, I don't understand the emotional part of it, but, like, for the player, like, they're consciously making that decision to go and fix that match and lose that match on purpose. So,
yeah.
Yeah.
So when it comes to you and your teammates, obviously these days sports doesn't exist without sports betting, and y'all have been advised not to bet, and but is it, and I'm sure like there are probably some conversations about betting just because of y'all are in sports, but like do y'all ever have conversations about match fixing in tennis? Do y'all, or is it like a taboo, awkward, like we're not talking about this thing that's we all know is like not necessarily happening at the college level, but like, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I think it would. We don't talk about it, not because it's necessarily taboo. It's just it's not necessarily relevant to us
Right.
as of right now. Um, and that I'm aware of. It's never been brought up to any of the guys on the team for like the professional events that they've played. And so, yeah, we don't have the conversation just because it's just not really necessarily, it doesn't necessarily involve us. I think that I could sit down with any of the guys and be like, hey, like, and have a conversation about betting in tennis, and it'd be totally normal and be able to kind of talk about it how we are right now. So I wouldn't say it's taboo. It's just not as relevant where we're at right now.
I wonder if any of them have ever been,
Yeah, that's a great question.
Reached out
I might
to.
have to
Yeah.
send that in the group chat later.
and then I'll update the description box and say if Parker updates us on if somebody has been
yeah,
prompted to fix a match or a set or a game. Going on to the punishment side of things, what do you think should happen to a player who is caught fixing a match or set or game?
The ban from being able to play is obviously gets its point across, and that's why I think like, hey, if you're only allowed to bet on the top 200 players, like they're so close, and so like, hey, if you're 170 in the world and you get caught, like the dream's over. And so I personally don't have anything wrong with players being banned if they get caught for it. Like it's illegal, you should not do it. Like that's end of story. Like
Right.
I don't know. Maybe if you have like you said that someone got fined for doing
Yeah,
it as well.
they got banned and fined.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think both of those things are fair.
Right. Everybody always talks about like the integrity of the sport, but literally this damages the integrity of the sport when like people don't want to watch it if they think that or know that it's sometimes not real. Do you know what I mean? And obviously like as a sports fan, and like I mean you're a sports fan too. So it just like as a whole it's just messy.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? As I mentioned at the beginning, in 2021, the International Tennis Integrity Agency was created to kind of combat this sort of thing. How familiar are you with this organization?
Really not at all. Yeah. That was kind of the first time that when you mentioned it, I didn't. I maybe had heard it in the past and kind of slipped my mind, but yeah, I wasn't not aware of it really at all.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. We talked about how you were saying how like there's ads everywhere about that are promoting sports gambling and all the things. Do you think that the promotion and growth of the advertisements for sports gambling increases the likelihood for match fixing, or do you think that it would happen regardless? Or, yeah, that.
I guess it would. I think there's the more you see it, the more like people are like, oh, I'll download that app. Like, hey, it's a good deal, whatever. And so, I still think it would happen regardless. But I think obviously the more it's publicized and the more like, hey, betting this, betting that on whatever sport it might be, just the more people that are involved in it. Well, the more you're involved in it, the more people that they go down this rabbit hole or that rabbit hole. I think that it might have an increase on match fixing, but I do still think it would happen regardless. And I'm assuming again that probably these match fixes are not done on like a DraftKings or it's probably done through something that's a lot more undercover, and I may be wrong with that. But so yes, I think it could increase it, but I think it's happening either way. Yeah.
Right. Kind of moving into what college is like. So in college tennis, you're on a team. and all that stuff. So what do you think the role of team culture is in preventing match fixing?
How, like, by
Like the fact that it's not individual. Like how can y'all do
okay,
y'all
I see what you're saying.
or on that note, how do y'all support one another in making ethical decisions? I mean, even if at some point when y'all are playing individually, like how does the role of being on a team at some point help prevent match fixing?
Sure. So I think that, like, obviously when you're on a team, like, you lose and it affects your team. And so I think that while there isn't necessarily a format in the professional level like college, like where it's like a season of like team, like you're on this team and you play like a season or a series of matches and there's like a champion at the end of the season. There are things that are similar. Davis Cup, for example, is you play for your country and there's different levels of qualifying, and that kind of does happen throughout the year. There's, hey, at the beginning of the year, there's a couple of qualifyings, and then later on in the year, there's a couple more qualifyings. It's more set up kind of like the World Cup in a way. And so, and then towards I think it's happening in November this year, the final 8 teams that qualify through throughout the season get to play for their country to win the Davis Cup. And so I think that events like that, the Labor Cup, which is another one which is relatively new, is for those that are familiar with the Ryder Cup. In golf, it's very similar. For tennis, it's the world versus Europe. And so they have the biggest names in tennis play in that event, which is really cool and has been fun over the years of getting to see those matches. But again, like, they care about winning as a team, and they care about the person that they're playing with. And so I definitely think that team culture has an impact, or the element of being on a team has an impact of, hey, it's not just about you. It's not just about you getting your money or you making, like, especially when you're playing for your country. Like, there's an element of a weight behind that. Like, I can't imagine the United States being in the semifinals of the Davis Cup and there's an offer of however much money and the guy throws a match playing for the United States. Like, I think that there's definitely an element of the team which can help limit match fixing, and since doesn't happen often throughout the season in tennis. I think one of the elements that kind of hit me as you asked that question was like, well, you have a coach and you have have a coach especially when you're higher ranked, a coach and a physio, and you've got like 3 or 4 people sitting in your box, and there's a lot of people attached to you, and so while you could say, yes, okay, sports betting, and then I'm going to pay them some extra amount, but like, hey, if you get caught, like, it affects more than just you ending your career. Like, hey, they're now out of a job as well.
So it's really not just a one-to-one sport.
Obviously, I think that the bigger the team, like, around that one individual, is obviously seen more in the higher ranks. So at a lower level, you may just have one coach.
Right.
And so that's where, like, oh, maybe I'm going to be able to pull it off for me and my coach, and we're going to split it or something like that. So I think maybe in that way it could be hurtful. I don't know if that's necessarily the right answer. But yeah, the team element definitely can impact it for, I think as a whole can help limit it.
Right. So there are some team events like the Davis Cup, Billie Jean King Cup, like you were talking about. Do you think there would ever be a day where team tennis would be a bigger thing?
I think it would be awesome. They used to have a league called World Team Tennis, and that I think lasted for about 40 years or so, and that was set up more like college, and that was for professionals, and they had some decently big names, but like your Novak, your Federer, those guys didn't play, and so it obviously was successful, lasted for 40 years. But has kind of fizzled out a couple of years ago. And so I think there's been efforts for it to look like that. I just don't see it ever. I think it's just so well established. And again, like just the history of it. I think the little events here and there, kind of I guess accomplish the including the team aspect of into professional tennis.
Maybe one day.
It would be awesome, and I would love to see it. And I was talking with the guys, just kind of thinking about like how cool would it be if the Laver Cup, for example, was set up in a way like currently right now it's just one court in a big stadium, and you kind of just rotate who's playing against who. But if somehow you could set it up how it's set up like college tennis, and you had, for example, Kyrgios versus Djokovic on court 1, and you had Alcaraz versus Schwartzman on court 2, and had that all the way down the line 1 through 6, how college tennis is set up, I think would be so cool. And so maybe one day in the future, like the Laver Cup could, it being such a new event, I think it's only 7 or 8 years old, could kind of transform into something like that. But I would love to see. I love watching, whether it be golf and other individual sport. I love watching the Ryder Cup, the President's Cup, these different team events for individual sports. I think is awesome.
Yeah. To kind of wrap up a few things, as someone who loves this sport so much, grew up all in it, how does this issue make you feel?
I would say a little. I think can be frustrating at times. Like, hey, like, and not so much for the. I'm trying to get my thoughts together here, but I think frustrated. Again, frustrated at times for, like, why? Like, I get that you're making money. I guess that's probably the question that comes to mind is like, why is it happening? And I think if I was told, like, again, since it's at the lower levels, it doesn't like necessarily stir that great of an emotion inside of me. I haven't looked into it too deeply, so there's not like a whole lot of feeling for that specific element. But like, hey, if like someone told me like, hey, like the French Open semifinal, like that set was fixed, that would really bother me.
Yeah.
So I think when like the tournaments that I love watching and have had memories with my dad or my brother or my grandfather, like watching like epic matches, and like if I were to find out like, hey, like that was actually fixed, like that would kind of crush me in a way. So I think that element is kind of where like I'm just hopeful that that's not actually true, and there's not actually things happening in the top players in the world. Yeah, because I think that's where probably my biggest emotional pull would be. Like, wow, that would kind of like pop my bubble in a way.
Yeah, it ruins it. It's no fun.
Exactly.
It's not fun if it's fake.
Yeah.
What would you say to gamblers who arrange this sort of thing, if you could say something to them?
I like, what are you doing? Like,
Stop.
Yeah, exactly. I would love to just know, like, that's where like I go to like the heart of like why. Like I would love to like what's going on, like you're doing this, because I think that like almost like, hey, if you're this professional better, than like why not go do it the real way and like prove that you can actually like, hey, like you can actually bet on matches that aren't fixed and prove that you're this like professional better. It's pretty I think cowardly and kind of like you're kind of being soft and taking the easy way out. And so yeah, like first off, why, like get to the heart of like, hey, like what's going on, and then like, hey, like let's go do it for real and not just do it the roundabout way.
Right. And then lastly, what would you say to the players who participate in fixing matches?
I think just like think beyond yourself, like how this and I get, okay, like, hey, I'm making all this money, but like how is it I guess like getting caught, like how does that impact things? And then I think just kind of pointing back to like, hey, like you play this, reminding them of like, hey, like why did you grow up playing tennis? Like why have you got, like you're obviously very good. If you're top 1,000 in the world in anything that you do, you're incredible at it. So like reminding them of like, hey, like the hard work that they put in to get there. Like, dude, what are you doing? Like, I get that you're not making a lot of money right now, but like bust your tail for 3 years. And like, hey, if you make it to 200 in the world, amazing, congrats. Like, but after 3 years, you don't. Like, I get that for some, like, hey, it's kind of a way for them to get out of maybe the situation they've grown up in, or the country that like, for tennis is such a global sport. Like, hey, maybe a country just like it's not a great situation in that country, and this is kind of their way out. And oh, now they're able to make $50,000 through a match fix. But yeah, pointing them back to like, why did you grow up playing, and then pushing them like, hey, like go all out for 3 years and see what happens. If it doesn't work after 3 years, you've already, and this is, hey, if you go to someone or a tennis facility or tennis club or like, hey, like I was 800 in the world, and kind of present your resume of what you've done in tennis, like you're going to get a job teaching tennis somewhere or being a coach, or there's so many other avenues to get out of I guess a bad situation, just because of the level that that person is playing at. So yeah, I know I'm repeating myself, but give it all you got for 3 years. If it doesn't work out, use the other avenues that you've created for yourself through being a professional tennis player to make the money that you need to make and get out of the situation that maybe isn't great. So yeah, that would be my encouragement to those players.
I love it. Well, this has been great. Amazing interview. Your insight is so valued, and I know that one day there will be some change due to your notes app on this April 9th. Yeah, thank you so much for coming on this podcast, and I look forward to hearing your update as to if somebody has been approached or not. Is there any last things you want to tell people?
I don't really think I have anything. I think I'll leave it at what I would encourage, and I guess that beyond just the players that are match fixing, like I think for whatever sport you're playing or whoever's listening to this, like whatever you're gonna do, like just go at it with all you've got. If it doesn't work out, like it's okay. Like at least you can lay your head down at peace and at rest. Like I gave it my best, and maybe it flopped. With whether it's a sport or a career, like just give it your best and be able to rest at night because you know that you've given it your all. But yeah, thanks for having me. This has been awesome. I appreciate it. Yeah, thank you so much.
Of course. All right. Bye, guys.